What's up guys, it's OutofOrder. Welcome back to the channel, and in this video I'm going to be showing you some of my favorite Sapphire effects and what you can do with these tools. Now the past few weeks I've been going to concerts almost daily. Ever since I bought my dream camera, this bad boy right here, I've been really changing up my lifestyle and schedule, and I've been doing a lot more videography with the occasional photography on the side. And as an artist, whether you're a CGI artist, a VFX artist, a compositor, or a colorist, we're always striving to get the best results with the fast render times with no compromise. Now, if you've been subscribed to my channel for a while, you've probably heard me say countless great things about Sapphire, which is the main topic of today. This video is brought to you by BorisFX, who makes some of my favorite plugins. Also, there's an affiliate link down below in the description, just below the like button, and it'll give you 15% off. But don't just take my word for it, let me show you. So as you guys saw by those examples, and as I mentioned earlier, I've been going to a ton of concerts recently, and that's what the topic is, so let me show you how to do them. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to be showing you how to create cool little effects using luma mats and alpha mats, essentially masking without the actual masking part. The second part will be showcasing transitions, and the last and final part will be creating distortions using motion tracking. So let's get into it. Okay, so let's start off with this clip right here. Now, as you can see, I got a clip of me doing some videography work for a local band. They're called Los Mocos, and as you can see, the band actually performed at a Burger King, but nevertheless, this is the clip I'm going to be using. Now, you can use any clip you'd like. As you can see, pretty much only the highlights are non-distorted, and everything else around them is distorted. So I'm going to show you how to create that simple effect. It's pretty easy to do. So all you got to do right here, we're going to create a simple matte. So I'm going to Control-C, Control-V the original clip right here. The next thing I usually do is it depends on what you want to matte. So we want to matte the shadows. So we pretty much want everything but the highlights to be affected. So to do that, what I usually like to do is add an effect like S-invert. Now, as you can see, it's going to invert the clip. Now, I usually turn off invert chroma. Now, the Sapphire S-invert, as you can see, I searched it up using FXConsole by Video Copilot, and if you're not using anything to search for it, you can find S-invert underneath Sapphire adjust. So right here, as you can see, it'll be right there, S-invert. So we're just going to add that onto our duplicated clip. So now we're going to offset the highlights and stuff. Now you can use this with curves or any other effect like levels. However, Sapphire has it built in the S-invert, so all we got to do is drag the darks lower, and then we'll probably increase the lights too. So we got a simple little matte right there. Now if you're familiar with the effect luma key and threshold, we can also do something similar to that using S hotspots. So I'm going to add hotspots on here. Now what S hotspot does is it's pretty simple. It's almost like a luma key. However, instead of keying it out, it's just going to mess around with the shadows a bunch, so we can decrease it more like this. Once you have a simple matte like this created, all we're going to do now is hide the layer because we don't really need to mess with it anymore. And I'm going to create an adjustment layer using Control-Alt-Y, and you can also create one by right clicking, going to new adjustment layer, or going to the top and going to new adjustment layer. Once we have an adjustment layer, the effect that I showed as an example was S-warp chroma, so that'll usually be in Sapphire Distort over here. Now once we have warp chroma, we have two options. So we can create a track matte. However, Sapphire makes it a lot easier than having to do any of that, so we don't need to mess with layers. Instead, we can just go up to the top, matte from layer, and I'm going to select the layer that has all of the luma mats on it. Now as you can see, it doesn't really look too good. It looks a little weird. So if we change it from source to effects and mask, as you can see, it's going to be taking in all these effects that we added on here, and it's going to add it to the matte, so we get something more like this. Now the settings that I did was I usually lower the Z distance a lot, so instead of having it clip or anything like that, we just get this effect. Now another thing that Sapphire does really well is you can actually have it reflect. So if we change the wrap to reflect, what's going to happen is, let's say you want it to go the other way, so like how it was at the start. Now with reflect on, we don't really lose any details or any information because it's basically just mirroring what's around it. However, having reflect off also does look kind of cool. It kind of creates a sort of vignette effect. However, I'm going to make it similar to what we had in the preview, so I'll keep this on. You can also decrease the steps if you want more RGB separation, or you can increase it more if you want it to be a little smoother. And the other effect I had on was S-rays, which basically just create some simple volumetric lighting. So to do that, we're going to make another matte. So I'm going to select this one right here. I'm going to Control-C and Control-V. You could use the same matte if you want. However, in this example, what I'm going to do instead is, instead of having the whites appear on the shadows, we're going to do the opposite and make the whites whiter and the blacks darker. So to do that, we're going to first of all get rid of the S-invert we originally had on this one, And then the hot spots we could probably keep, and we can also probably brighten it up some more too, just a little bit. Now I'm going to drag this one above the adjustment layer. We're going to rename these so it's more organized. So as you can see, we got our first matte, which is essentially just the whites and blacks inverted. And then we got our second one, which is only the highlights, which is what we want. Now I'm going to hide both of these layers. I'm going to make a new adjustment layer with Control-Alt-Y. Now I'm going to add S-Rays onto here. Once we add S-Rays, we can simply select the matte from layer and then choose the highlights. Make sure effects and masks is selected, and now we can mess around with the threshold a bunch, and no matter how much we mess with the threshold, it's only going to use the highlights. So none of the other stuff is going to be affected. So as an example, if I turn off the matte from layer, the entire clip is pretty much going to be affected, but we don't want that. We only want the highlights to really glow. So I'm going to select the matte we created with the highlights, and as you can see, we can increase the length a lot. Let's lower the brightness. I usually do 1 to 2. Let's try 2 actually. And we can also mess around and change the color of it too. However, I usually just keep it on the default white, so that way it takes whatever color is glowing and it's going to use that color instead. So as you can see, the yellow guitar is glowing yellowish, and then as you can see, the white fit is glowing white. That's how I created what I made in the preview. And now let's move on to the next one. Alright, so this is the next tutorial I'm going to be teaching you guys. So as you can see, I got a clip right here of a guy running with a board, and on this part I'm going to show you how to use this clip and make a cool transition out of it using Sapphire. So what I did in the preview was I actually used an effect called S-Grunge. Now S-Grunge is kind of an underrated effect. I don't see a lot of people using it a lot. However, this one is actually extremely powerful. So as you saw, I just created a solid just now by pressing Control-Y. You can also do the same thing by right-clicking New Solid, and of course going to the top, New Solid. Once we have our solid right here, I'm going to add the effect S-Grunge. Now, as you can see, this doesn't really look like an effect that would be used for transitions. However, I found a way to make it kind of make a pretty cool transition. So the way this works is that we're going to have the white splatters appear out of nowhere, and whatever is black is not going to be visible, but whatever is white is going to be visible. So what I've done here is we got stamp 1 and stamp 2 details. Stamp 2 details, we don't need it because we're only going to use this as a transition. So we'll turn this off completely. Now, all we have here is stamp 1. I haven't changed any other settings other than the color, so stamp 1 color 1 is going to be black, color 2 is going to be white. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to keyframe the size right here. So what I usually do is I lower the size all the way down to 0, and once we do that, once we make it 0, click the stopwatch to make a keyframe. We're going to click on our clip down on the timeline, press U to open up our little keyframe icons. Once we have that open, we're just going to drag this to the beginning of the clip. We're going to go a little bit ahead, and then we're going to increase the size a bunch. So as you can see, it's going to start growing a lot. Now that we have that out of the way, we can also select the keyframes, press F9 on our keyboard to easy ease it, open up our graph editor here, and we want it to kind of slow down over time. So it's going to start off really fast, and then it's going to slow down and stop. So once we have the white particles growing, we eventually want it to be completely white, so that way our clip is completely on screen 100%. So to do that, we're going to go to the brightness. I usually keep it at 1 to about halfway in, and then if we go a little bit ahead in time, we're going to make the brightness a lot higher to where it's completely white. And just like that, we're going to select these as well, F9 to easy ease them, and once we do that, all we got to do is hide this layer. Now, as you can see, it doesn't look like a transition just yet. So what we're going to do now is select our clip, and we're going to make a track matte out of it, which is this thing right here. Now, if the track matte isn't there and is missing for some reason, all you got to do is go down to the bottom, see this icon right here, click on it, and it's going to expand, and it's going to give you this little button right here. Now, to make it a transition, all we got to do is click on here and go to Luma Matte. Now, what that's going to do is whatever is black is not going to show up, and whatever is white is going to show up. So as you can see, it starts off black, fades to white, and that's exactly what our clip is going to do too. Now, if you're wondering how I got it green and bluish and did a little bit of color grading, that's pretty easy. So the original clip right here, which is the one we're working on, I had S duotone on it. So once you have S duotone added, what I usually like to do is color 1 is usually going to be the highlights. So for color 1, I like to invert them. Now, instead of having to add an invert effect, all we got to do is just make this black, color 0, and then make that any color you'd like. Now, I did green for this one, so we're going to select it like that. You can also mess with the softness as well as the threshold too. So if you want it to be, you know, maybe like more of it is sharper like that. I also had S-grain static on this clip as well, so we're going to add S-grain static. Now, what that's going to do is pretty self-explanatory. It's going to add some static, give it more of an edgy vibe to it. Now, if you're wondering how I made that really cool glow with this clip, it's pretty easy. So what I did was I had this transition from the grunge effect, and then I had it transition into another clip that has more of a glowy vibe. So let's just create just that. So I'm going to duplicate this layer by Control C and Control V. I'm going to drag this above the solid. So I'm going to delete all these effects on it. And then what I had on this clip was a lot different. So what I had on here was S monochrome, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's going to make it black and white, and you can mess around with these settings too. So if you want the reds to be, you know, different from the greens, so if you want to just separate these more, you can play around with these settings till you get something a little bit more cool. The next thing I had on this clip was S flicker, which is another one of my favorite effects. So if we just add S flicker on here, what I like to do is I like the flickers to be really fast, so I always make the frequency higher. If you don't want it to be fast, you can always lower it. Now amplitude, honestly 0.2 is pretty good. Not going to be too dramatic, however it is going to be there. And then the last effect that I had on here was the classic S-rays like we used in the last tutorial. Decrease the threshold so more of the S-rays show up. I'm going to increase the ray length, and I'm going to actually blur the rays these times so it doesn't just feel too sharp, but rather just looks a little bit smoother, more like a glow almost. We'll make the brightness 2, and then the color, I did the exact same color I had for the original clip, which was like a greenish right here. Now as you can see, all we got is this clip, which is not what we want. We want it to transition, so if we press T on our keyboard, it's going to bring up the opacity panel, add a keyframe at the end over here, go over here, and we're just going to have it fade in. You can also split the clip by pressing Ctrl-Shift-D, so I'm going to split this clip right here. We're going to delete this part, so as you can see, it's going to transition into here, and then the opacity is going to fade over it, and that's how we get that look right there. Now there's 2 more things I had in the preview that we haven't done yet. I had a second S-grunge, which we can create right now. So to make another S-grunge, I'm going to do this on an adjustment layer actually instead. This is still luma matting, so we're going to turn this off. Now once we have this adjustment layer, I'm going to add a second grunge. So let's just add this on here. And then for this one, we're going to remove the stamp 1 details, but keep stamp 2. So with stamp 2, I'm going to change the color to maybe something like little greenish blue right there. And then make this one more of a blue as well. So as you can see, we got this one right here. Now what I had on the preview was the exact opposite. So for example, this solid right here starts off small, grows big. Now I'm going to do the opposite and have it start big and grow small. We go down here, select this one, make sure you got the right grunge effect because we have 2 of them now. So for this one, I'm going to go down here. I'm going to make the size a lot bigger. Maybe not too big, but let's just try 4. And then once it's at 4, I'm going to go down over here. I'm going to make it 0. We're just going to make this look a lot better so it looks less dull and lame. So I'm going to make another adjustment layer. And once we have an adjustment layer, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add more Sapphire effects, like one of my favorites, S vignette. So once we add S vignette, it's pretty simple. All it does is add a simple vignette, a little shadow on the edges. And now what really gives it that sort of glow that I had on the start was, you guessed it, S Ultra Glow. Now this one's pretty good. There's also an S Glow. However, I prefer S Ultra Glow. I think it looks a lot better, so we're going to use this one instead. Once you have S Ultra Glow added on your adjustment layer, we can mess around with the threshold. So I usually decrease the threshold a lot, and I usually increase the glow width so there's more glow to it. And then the color, as you guys know, we're going to make it the same color we had earlier. So let's just go with something like that. Maybe decrease the width a little bit, maybe increase the threshold a little bit as well. Now there's 2 more effects we got to add before we're done. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to color grade it. So you can use any color grading effect you want. You can use Lumetri Color. You can use Magic Bullet Looks if you have that. I'm going to be using Lumetri Color since it comes with After Effects. And with Lumetri Color, we can make a lot of adjustments. So we can decrease the vibrance a little bit. We can go down to curves, maybe decrease the shadows a little bit, maybe add a little bit of a shadow tint on as well. I think the highlights also need to be decreased, so let's lower these highlights up here. As you can see, we got kind of a sick color grading going on. And now the very last effect that I had on this edit was pretty simple, and that is S-Shake. So let's add that on here. So we're going to select our adjustment layer. Now the default S-Shake settings, I'm personally not too much of a fan of. So the frequency, for example, 8 is just too high. So let's make it 5 so it's not shaking as fast. The amplitude, we could increase it a little bit. And now what I always enable almost every time is tilt shake. Tilt shake is off by default. However, I'm going to turn this on by making it something simple like maybe 5. And what tilt shake does essentially is it's basically rotation. So by default, S shake will only shake by moving up and down or left and right. But with tilt shake on, it's also going to rotate a little too. So I usually use a small value like 5 for that. You can also use Z shake too if you want to turn that on, go for it. Z shake essentially just lets lets the edge shake back and forth, so closer or further away. What I did on the preview that you guys saw was I went down here to channels and I increased the green amplitude. Now what that's gonna do is it's gonna add some sort of RGB splitting on your shake. And the last thing we'll do with edge shake is we'll turn on motion blur. Now it looks pretty cool so far, however, I kind of want the shake to die down, so we'll go to the start, keyframe the amplitude, go somewhere ahead of time, and then we're gonna lower the amplitude down to 0, select both the clips, F9, open our graph editor, and now I'm gonna drag this out here, and I'm gonna drag this over here like this. And there you guys have it. That's how to create transitions using Sapphire. Now let's move on to the next one, which is my personal favorite. So this is the third and final tutorial I'm going to show you guys how to do. So as you guys can see, we got the guitarist strumming her guitar, and I essentially motion tracked some cool little warping effects to it so the warps follow her movement, and I'm going to show you guys how to do it. So for this tutorial, guys, I'm going to be using the track motion feature in After Effects. We're not going to be tracking the camera because we're not doing any 3D effects, so yeah. So to get started, make sure your clip is pretty easy to track. You don't want to motion track a clip that has a lot of obstructions or is really shaky or is blurry or anything like that. You want your clip to be pretty clean and easy to track. So this clip should work. We're not going to track anything that's going to be too hard to track, so we're not going to like add a tracker here because obviously she's strumming over it. So we're going to select something like this part right here, and we're going to track on something like that. So to do that, all I'm going to do is go up here, select the clip. You should have a tracker tab over here, and if you don't, all you got to do is go to Window, and then make sure tracker is enabled. Once you have that open, we're going to click on track motion, and as you can see, it's going to generate a track. So what you can do with this track point is we're going to make it a little bit bigger, and we're going to drag it over here. Now this little bolt right here is what I tracked in the preview, so we're going to be doing the same thing. So make sure your tracker point right here is directly on it. It should have a lot of contrast, which this does, and you want to make sure this box inside covers the whole object, and this part right here, you can make this size however you want really. However, I'd recommend keeping it somewhat small. This is basically the area that it's going to search for this object. However, if it's too big like this, you're going to be here all day and it's probably not going to work and you'll just be waiting forever. So something like this is fine. So we're just going to select this right here. You can also track the rotation too. And when you track the rotation, you essentially just want to find another part to track too. So something like this one right here would work. However, I'm not going to do rotation in this tutorial because I don't think it's necessary and wouldn't make much of a difference. So once you have your tracker points set, the next thing we got to do is simple. All we got to do is track. So once we're ready to track, we have everything good to go. All we got to do is click Analyze Forward. Now this might take a bit of time depending on your clip. If it's really long or if it's in a high resolution, it'll probably take a while. My clip's in 4K. However, it's moving at a decent speed. So once we're done analyzing forward, we can also go back to the original starting position and analyze backwards now. Alright, so now that we've analyzed forwards and backwards, as you can see, our track is perfectly good to go. Looks pretty good, looks pretty clean. So the next thing we're going to do is create a null by using the keyboard shortcut Control-Alt-Shift-Y, which is kind of hard to press. You might need both hands for that, but you can also go up to the top if you can't remember, going up here and creating a null object. So that's this one right here. But anyway, once you have the null created, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to edit the target. So we're going to go back to our tracker, click on Edit Target, and you're going to want to select the null object. So click OK. Once you have the null object selected up here, all you got to do is press Apply. It should ask you a bunch of stuff right here. We just want X and Y. Now, once you press Apply, it's going to put you back in the main composition. So as you can see, we're back in the main comp. There's no tracker on here anymore. However, if we open the null, all the information is saved on this null. So now that we have a null object, you're probably wondering, well, how do we add effects onto it? Well, it's pretty simple. We're just going to create a new adjustment layer with Control-Alt-Y. Once we have an adjustment layer, the effect that I showed in the preview was S Warp Repeat. Pretty simple effect. As you can see, it's going to do this right here. Now I'm going to turn on the reflect over here on the wrap settings so that it mirrors everything, and we can also create a lot more reflections. So I'll probably just do something like 5 for now. It looks kind of lame. It doesn't really look that cool. We want it to follow that tracker. So what we do is we're going to go to our null object, click on it, press P on the keyboard, and as you can see, it brings up the position of the null. Now if we go up here and if we go to center XY up here, we're going to hold Alt and we're going to click on the stopwatch icon. Now once you hold Alt and click on the stopwatch icon, if we go down here, you'll notice this turns red. This is essentially creating a simple expression. So if we go down to the bottom of our timeline and press the tilde key, it's going to full screen it, and the tilde key is essentially that squiggly line underneath the escape key, also known as the grave key. But anyway, we're just going to full screen this real quick. Once we have this full screen, we're going to go back over here, hold Alt, click on this. As you can see, it's going to make an expression, so you could type some commands here if you know what you're doing. However, I feel like the easiest way to create that effect that I showed you is we're just going to go here, select the pick whip icon up here, and we're going to link it to the position of our null. And to open the position of our null, all you got to do is press P on the keyboard and it'll bring this up. And once you do that, as you guys can see, it's going to follow the tracker, which looks pretty sick. You can of course mess with all these settings right here. So if you want to add rotation, you can add a little rotation. It doesn't even have to be S-warp repeat. S-warp chroma that I also showed at the beginning of the video is also another good choice. You can do the same thing. So pretty much any effect that has center X, Y, you can link it to your position of your null and it's going to be tracked to it just like that. And that brings us to the end of the video, ladies and gentlemen. I really hope you learned something new. As you can see, Sapphire is a really powerful tool that I use on a daily basis. There's just so much you can do with it. You can use it for transitions, you can use it for creating cool lighting, and you can even link everything to pretty much a motion tracker, just like how I showed right now. And if you want to see a full edit using these clips that I demonstrated in this tutorial, I'll leave a link down below to a recent edit. That edit uses all the clips I showed in this video, as well as a bunch of Sapphire effects. So as you can see, I did some tracking effects, I did some transitions in it. It's pretty cool and I recommend checking it out. So to put it simply, guys, I love Sapphire and I personally think you will love Sapphire too, just as much as I do. So I'll be leaving a link down below to an affiliate link. Thank you so much, BorisFX, for reaching out to me to create a video. I really had a ton of fun making this video and I have a ton of fun using your programs. The possibilities with these tools are honestly endless. So as long as you got an imagination, you can pretty much create infinite possibilities with these. But nevertheless, guys, thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you're new, guys. Comment down below what other videos and tutorials you would like to see from me. My social media links like my Instagram, Twitter, Discord, and all that other good stuff are in the description too. And I really hope to catch you guys in the next one, boys. Happy editing as always, and I really hope to catch you guys in the next video, boys. Peace out.